I think one of the strangest things happening in the literary world right now is seeing controversies turn into marketing strategies, not accidental controversies or general misunderstanding, but actual deliberate outrage. Because the publishing industry has realized something quite terrifying, and it's that not everyone will buy the books that they love, but they will buy the books that everyone is fighting about. And it feels like every few weeks there is a new author being accused of things like racism, anti Semitism, Islamophobia, abuse, harassment, or even use of AI. And the latest example of this is the book Lost Lambs by Madeleine Cash, which has sparked a lot of debate online due to its accusations of alleged Islamophobia, harmful stereotypes, and even religious bias. And as always, many people have run to the debate comments and saying separate the art from the artist. But honestly, I don't think this debate is as easy as that, because once art enters the culture sphere, it stops existing in isolation. Because books shape culture, authors gain platforms, and money becomes influence. So the real question here is not can we separate the art from the artist, but actually at what point does supporting the art also mean supporting the harm behind it? Hello, my gorgeous viewers and readers. Welcome back and welcome if you're new. I hope your weekend was filled with warm sunshines, iced matchas, and the deeply stressful feeling that your favorite author is one bad tweet away from being cancelled. Because today I want to talk about something that has almost become unavoidable in literary spaces, which is controversial authors. Because honestly, it feels like the conversation in literature has shifted massively in the past 10 years. We are no longer discussing the writing quality of the books or the themes or the symbolism or the prose. We are also constantly talking about the authors themselves, like their politics, their behaviors, their social media presence, and also everything that they do and say. And recently, we have seen many examples of this happening in the literary world. For example, we have Neil Gaiman receiving public backlash because of all the allegations done against him, or J.K. Rowling becoming public enemy number one in the literary world because of all the anti-trans and TERF work that she is doing. But also, we see like Colleen Hoover being cancelled because of all her romanticization of abuse, but also her marketing choices and her silence towards the situation between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. And most importantly, we have also seen a resurgence of criticisms and revaluation of classic authors like H.P. Lovecraft because of all their personal opinions, even though all these authors are long gone. And now, most recently, we have seen a lot of discourse regarding Lost Lambs by Madeleine Cash. I have seen a lot of praise for this book due to its absurdist humor and also its sharp writing. But I have also seen a lot of criticism and discourse regarding its alleged Islamophobia, offensive language, but also religious bias. But this makes me ask myself a question, and it's that do artists actually have any sort of responsibility once their work enters the literary world? For those who don't know about the controversy, Lost Lambs is about a family called the Flynn family, whose each member just goes absolutely bananas and they just rapidly spiral into chaos, doing the weirdest shit ever. It is meant to be deeply satirical and very dark humorous. So the main point of the story is how crazy these people go, and these characters are meant to be deeply flawed and deeply unlikable. But, and there is always a but, the controversy starts because one of the members of the Flynn family, which I believe is one of the daughters, she actually starts an online relationship with someone who considers themselves a Muslim extremist. And very rapidly, she is pulled into this sort of extreme religious environments, most specifically extremely Islamic environments. And she not only almost converts to Islam, even though she is Jewish, but also she starts co-planning a terrorist attack with this extremely religious boyfriend. And the issue here is that not only this Muslim character, is the only character who is a person of color, but also who is Muslim. But also at the same time, I think it's at the end of the book that this daughter actually decides to just cut back from this extreme religiousness, but also decides to break up with the Muslim boyfriend and just get another boyfriend who is Jewish. And it is very heavily implied, if not actually mentioned in the book, that she chose the right option. She chose Jewishness over these other boyfriends. So she made the right decision. So obviously, as you can expect, the internet went wild, because even though it is this novel, it's meant to be deeply satirical and dark humorous, there are still a lot of depictions that feel strange or even slightly out of touch, I would say, because the fact that the only Muslim character is an extremely religious character who is planning to do a terrorist attack feels somehow targeted to Islam or against Islam, if not to say heavily Islamophobic. But also it feels very stereotypical that a Muslim character is also a terrorist, right? That feels like you are just racially and ethnically profiling and even religiously profiling. But also, most importantly, it feels as if this character or this daughter who he was Jewish and just got a Muslim boyfriend and then just decided to revert back to Jewishness and make the right option, not only feels like Islamophobia all over again, but it also feels as if you're exalting Judaism over Islam. Meanwhile, other people actually defended the novel, saying that the characters are meant to be deeply flawed and unlikable. It's not just this Muslim character, but every single character is meant to be deeply flawed and unlikable. Also, other people mentioned that the satire and the dark humor in this book are deeply misunderstood. And even some people mentioned that just because the author is talking about these subjects, that doesn't mean that she is endorsing them. And honestly, this is the perfect example of what I have been saying, because this discourse has very quickly stopped from being about the text to being about the morality of the author. But also, this is the perfect example of how this controversy and this discourse has become the perfect marketing strategy for this book. Because let's be honest and let's say the uncomfortable truths right now. And it's that authors are not these pure, morally pure beings than we think they are. They are not these gods that are above everyone else. They are people. They are human beings just like us, which means that they are also capable of doing prejudice, of bias, of hatred, of hypocrisy, of cruelty. They are capable of doing all these things and more, just like all these examples that I have been giving. The difference here is that authors have something that the vast majority of us don't, which is a platform that amplifies rhetoric and ideology. Because you sharing your personal or controversial opinion with your friends is one thing, but when someone expresses their harmful opinions or their harmful ideology with millions of viewers and readers, that goes far beyond personal opinion. This is why authors become cultural figures rather than entertainers. Let's say Neil Gaiman, for example. He was one of the, if not the most important author of our generation regarding fantasy, horror, and sci-fi. He was untouchable in fandom spaces. He was considered intelligent, beloved, progressive, and even extremely creative. And he was so adored up until all these allegations came up against him, and then he got successfully cancelled. He disappeared from Earth. And this is because audiences often attach emotions and morals to what they read. And they expect that the meaningful stories that they read also come with meaningful artists or authors. So when this is not the case, we often feel betrayed. We feel as if the meaningful stories that we read are a lie. But the conversation becomes even more complicated when we add money into the equation, because consuming art is never economically neutral. If you buy books, you're not only supporting the artist, but also you're giving them money personally, and you're also expanding their influence and their platform, and also giving them more power within the publishing industry. Even hate reading and hate consuming can actually affect the publicity and the engagement of the book. And the best example of this is J.K. Rowling. Like, we have had a lot of discussions regarding the Harry Potter universe and how everything that you consume about the Harry Potter universe or that is related to said universe or to J.K. Rowling in general will actually benefit her and give her some sort of power in some way. For example, reading all the books as an adult, or watching the films once a year, or going to all the Harry Potter theme parks, or even buying all the Harry Potter merch can actually and still benefits her in some way. Not only monetarily, but also gives her more influence by the time. This is why there are a lot of people, especially within the trans and queer movement, that say that even if you like Harry Potter, or even if you have nostalgia towards that era or that cultural movement, you shouldn't support J.K. Rowling because she is heavily anti-trans. But I also understand the other side of the coin in this situation, because for many people, for millions of people around the world, Harry Potter has actually shaped their lives. There are people who grew up with Harry Potter, who grew up with all the universe, but also that are still heavily involved in the fandom. If you go into AO3, you will see that Harry Potter is still one of the most active tags. For example, it's still extremely popular. We see this with the video games, we see this with the new series. The Harry Potter universe is still extremely popular, and it's such a big cultural phenomenon. So I also understand how people can still try to consume or still want to consume the universe or anything related to the Harry Potter universe, even if they don't support J.K. Rowling or the anti-trans movement itself. I personally feel like I don't want to have anything to do with the Harry Potter universe because I am not anti-trans and I cannot separate art from the artist, but I also understand how people can think another way or a different way. And here is where the conversation gets even murkier, because I have seen a lot of people trying to put modern moral standards to our classic authors. Think of Edgar Allan Poe, Lord Byron, or Bram Stoker, Gaston Leroux, the whole bunch. And I think when you try to put contemporary moral standards to literary history, everyone can become cancelable. The best example that I have of this is H.P. Lovecraft. He was extremely racist. His racism was very explicit. It was not subtle at all. It also is very well documented, and it shaped the way he saw the world. But also at the same time, H.P. Lovecraft is one of the most prolific and most important authors in horror as a genre. His work in sci-fi, in horror fantasy, but most importantly, and in space and cosmological horror, remains one of the most important works in American literature. So in this case, what do we do? Do we just ignore the racism or the very obvious xenophobia that he had? Or do we actually just ignore H.P. Lovecraft completely? We just erase all his works and just make it as if he never existed in the first place, even though he is one of the founding fathers of horror as a genre? Or do we actually go to his work, read his work, and study it critically? Like, there are a lot of options that we can do, but no one seems to agree. Personally, I think there is a distinction to be made here, because I think there is a difference between supporting an artist who is alive and who is controversial, because if I support them, I am not only giving them the benefit monetarily, but also I am growing their influence. Whereas if I am supporting a historical figure, they have no way of benefiting from this influence because they have been dead for a long time. We also need to take into account historical context. That doesn't mean that we are supporting bigotry, but we need to take into account that morals and ethics change and grow over time. We cannot expect someone who was born and died 300 years ago to have the same morals and the same ethics that we as a contemporary society have. And this is why this conversation is so difficult, because everyone has a different opinion. Some people can separate the art from the artist. Some people cannot separate the two. Some people believe in these controversies and support the cancellation of these authors. Some people do not believe in them. So at the end of the day, no one has the right opinion, because everyone has their own choice and their own decision. But what we all should agree on is that social media has amplified this conversation conversations dramatically. Because if this book came out 30 years ago, the size of the controversy or the size of the discussion would be minimal compared to the size that it has now. And this is why I'm saying that social media has actually driven all these visibility, because now controversies are used to amplify visibility and amplify the influence that books and authors have. And this is the thing, visibility often translates to outrage, and outrage often gives a lot of engagement, and this engagement often is translated into profit or generates profit, which means that the more outrageous and the more controversial a book or something is, the more engaged people will be, and the more this engagement will drive the profit. This is why I'm saying that there are a lot of books, or there are a lot of authors who are gaining a lot of profit from dramas, from controversies, from all these potentially cancelable acts or behaviors and decisions that they make. And honestly, this is the part that scares me the most. Not the fact that controversial authors exist, because they have always existed through time, but the fact that modern internet culture is actually incentivizing drama and spectacle over sincerity. I also think that audiences should stop with the moral absolutism and actually understand that art has always been created by flawed people, sometimes deeply, deeply flawed people. So if we are actually coming here to discuss the literature and to actually understand the literature critically, we also need to hold ourselves onto the truths. That is, sometimes art can be really meaningful and still be harmful, and sometimes you can deeply relate to an artist that you can also feel disgusted by. At the end of the day, I don't think there is a perfect answer to the question, can we separate art from the artist? I think it depends on the person heavily, not only in the author, but also in the controversy as well. In my case, I would say that I separate the art from the artist when the artist can no longer benefit from me purchasing or using and consuming the art. But that is just my own personal opinion. I know that in many cases, and everyone will have their own opinion, but we also need to take into account, and that we need to put a lot of effort as a community, as the literary community, is that we need to think for ourselves, and we need to think critically rather than performatively. So maybe at the end of the day, we need to stop looking for the perfectly moral artists, because they probably don't exist, and instead put our attention to the stories that we engage with. We need to ask ourselves, what do we support, why we support it, and what are the consequences of us supporting said stories? Because at the end of the day, art does not exist in a vacuum, and neither do the people that create it. That's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure you like this video and that you subscribe to my channel. I have many more videos like this. You can also go onto my social media and follow me there. I post videos every day, and I post a lot more content, so you can also go in there. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I will see you next week, and have a great rest of your week. Bye, guys.